What is your name?
My name is Love, like the virtue.
Alright guys, here we are once again in the state of Massachusetts. We're going to be taking a trip in my time machine back to the year 1627 so we can see what a day in the life of a pilgrim was like. Let's have a look.
Lacking pails. So this one is called a wimple.
The year is 1627. It's been 7 years since the Mayflower arrived from England. Nearly one half of the ship's passengers died that very first winter from lack of shelter, scurvy, and general conditions on board ship. Seasons change, however, and with spring came new hope. They began to build shelter, sow crops, hunt, fish, and even had some help from a select few of the local native people who taught them of the three sisters, corn, bean, and squash, three vegetables that yield better crops when planted together, how to harvest and prepare cranberries, and how to use dead fish as fertilizer to ensure a healthy, abundant crop. 7 years later, this is what the colony would have looked like, home to around 250 residents. Let's take a look inside some of these quaint little homes and see how the Pilgrims actually lived. Remember, they had with them everything that was on board ship. Some furniture, cooking pots, ropes, blankets, body armor, weapons, clothing, livestock. So they were able to modestly stock their new village. You will see many of these items as we are looking around town. A second ship arrived in November 1621, 1 year after the Pilgrims first set foot in New England. It arrived with 37 new settlers. However, the ship arrived unexpectedly and also without many supplies, so the additional settlers ended up putting a strain on the resources of the colony. Ships arrived throughout the period, carrying new settlers, though the exact number is unknown. Documents indicate that the colony had almost 300 people by January 1630.
Cut down all the trees and get rid of all the native plants and animals. That will make the weather much more better, much more like England.
But methinks that won't happen for a great long while, as
Aye,
there's not
truly.
nearly enough of us right now to be able to do that and also feed ourselves.
Aye. But that is our ultimate endeavour here, to make this place into a New England under the rule of our gracious King James.
Marriage was considered the normal state for all adult residents of the colony. Second marriages were common due to social and economic pressures to remarry. Most widows and widowers remarried within 6 months to a year. Most adults who reached marriageable age lived into their 60s, so effectively 2/3 of a person's life was spent married. Women in Plymouth Colony had more extensive legal and social rights compared to 17th century European norms. They were considered to be equal in the eyes of God. However, they were also expected to take on traditionally feminine roles, such as child rearing and maintaining the household. Plymouth women enjoyed extensive property and legal rights also compared to European women who had very few rights at the time. A wife in Plymouth could not be written out of her husband's will, and was guaranteed a full third of the family's property upon his death. Women were parties to contracts in Plymouth, most notably prenuptial agreements. Women were also known to occasionally sit on juries in Plymouth, which is remarkable for 17th century legal practice. Family size in the colony was large by modern American standards. Families averaged 5 to 6 children living under the same roof, though it was not uncommon for one family to have grown children moving out before the mother had finished giving birth. Maternal mortality rates were fairly high. 1 in 5 women died during childbirth. The rate of infant mortality, however, seems to have been relatively low, which may have played a crucial role in their long-term survival. Children remained in the care of their mothers until around the age of 8, after which time it was not uncommon for the child to be placed in the care of another family. They were placed into households to learn a trade or to be taught how to read and write. It was believed that children's own parents would love them too much and would not properly discipline them. By placing children in the care of another family, there was less risk of them being spoiled. Orphan children were given the right to choose their own guardians at age 14. And at the age of 16, males became eligible for military service and were also considered adults for legal purposes, such as standing trial for crimes. There were several crimes that carried the death penalty: treason, murder, witchcraft, arson, sodomy, rape, bestiality, adultery, and cursing or smiting one's parents. The actual exercise of the death penalty, however, was fairly rare. Only one sex-related crime resulted in an execution: a 1642 incident of bestiality by Thomas Granger. Adultery was usually dealt with by public humiliation. Convicted adulterers were often forced to wear the letters AD sewn into their garments, much like in the novel The Scarlet Letter. The Pilgrims had in fact drafted a simple set of laws which they all agreed to adhere to. In fact, before they stepped off the ship that fateful day in 1620, they signed what is known as the Mayflower Compact, a legally binding form of self-government. The Pilgrims did not have a patent to settle this area, and some passengers began to question the right to the land, objecting that there was no legal authority to establish a colony, and in turn, no guarantee of retaining ownership over any land they had settled on. The intent of the Mayflower Compact was to establish a new means of governing this new colony. What they ended up with was a government similar to that of any English town. It did, however, serve the purpose of relieving the property concerns of many of the settlers, even though the land still did not belong to them. It did, though, make clear that the colony should be governed by just and equal laws, and those who signed it promised to keep those laws. The largest source of wealth for the Plymouth colony was the fur trade, which they engaged in with the local indigenous people. A raid by one of the colonists, Miles Standish, however, soured relationships between the Pilgrims and Indians, leading to economic hardships in the early years. The economic situation improved, however, with the arrival of cattle. Agriculture also made up an important part of the Plymouth economy.
Carrying Master Winslow his fence. This side here was lacking pails, so this was just called a wimble. And at an on-side wimbling a hole through which a nail shall be put, which shall hold the pail to the rail.
The colonists learned from the natives the best local agricultural practices and crops. They planted corn, squash, pumpkins, and beans. Besides the crops themselves, the Pilgrims learned productive farming techniques from the Indians, such as proper crop rotation and the use of dead fish to fertilize the soil. In addition to these native crops, the colonists also successfully planted Old World crops, such as turnips, carrots, peas, wheat, barley, and oats. It truly is an amazing tale to think 102 people board a merchant ship for a 66-day voyage to a new land. With them, only the supplies aboard ship and a whole lot of faith and fortitude. So was it a success? I suppose it depends on who you ask. Today, in the United States, there are 10 million living descendants of the original 102 Mayflower passengers. As we make our way back to town, we come across a Wampanoag village. Here you can see a dugout canoe being made. To make this, they use the burn-scrape method. Essentially, they burn the top layer of wood off, scrape the charcoal, burn, scrape, repeat, until they have a canoe. And up ahead here, we see a wetu, or a wigwam. Inside, we find a bunch of furs. This is what they would have been trading with the Plymouth settlers. And atop the hill, we find the old Plymouth fortress, built by the Pilgrims in 1621. It appears the first floor here was used as some type of meeting house, and up top was for defense purposes. Check out these cannons. Alright guys, let's head back to the time machine, and head back, forward, to the year 2023. Well, if you enjoyed this video guys, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Once again, thanks for watching.